Okay, my friends, the recording is beginning. Let's settle down. We're going to start with a prayer for the Jews in Israel, for the hostages, for the soldiers. Chapter 121. You ready? Guys, you ready? Good crowd. Shir Lamalos Esa Enai El Haharim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Osei Shamayim Retz Al Yitain Lamot Raglecha Al Yanum Shomrecha Hine Lo Yanum Velo Yishan Shomer Yisrael Adonai Shomrecha Adonai Al Yad Yiminecha Yomam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka V'yareach Balayla Adonai Yishmarcha Mikol Ra Yishmar Es Nafshecha Adonai Yishmar Seischa Uvoecha Me'ata V'ad Olam. Okay, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to go above adversity. To go above adversity. Those are big words. Above adversity. So you know the joke about this Jewish pessimist and this Jewish optimist. And the pessimist was having a tough day. He says, this day is so bad, it can't get any worse. And the optimist says, oh, yes, it could. Oh, yes, it could. Okay. So we're going to talk about two ways of looking at life tonight. The optimist way and the pessimist way, but that's a way oversimplifying the brilliance and the perspective of the Rebbe's way of understanding the struggles and the challenges and the adversity that we face in life. First, a very important disclaimer. Everything we're going to be talking about tonight we're not going to be talking about tragedies. We're not talking about, although at the end of the class I will, because we'll talk about October 7th and all that, but that's not the objective of what tonight's discussion is. Tonight we want to talk about the everyday struggles of life, like when your pipes burst in your house, or when you miss a flight, or when a deal that you were working on falls through, or when you stub your toe on the dining room table, or when your kids are making you a little meshugah, or when the guy sitting next to you in the synagogue is, making you a little nervous. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. The regular struggle, the regular stress, the regular challenges that any healthy human being is going to face in the course of living in this world. And we're going to actually discuss this in three different perspectives. The theme and the perspective that we're going to share from Hasidus and from the Rebbe tonight is going to be the same answer and the same solution to dealing with all kinds of challenges. But we're going to specifically break it down into three acts, if you will, into three different situations and scenarios in which we often find ourselves to be challenged. The first one will be situational. The second, for example, the bursted pipe, or the flat tire, or a snowstorm that ruined your plans. The second scenario and stage in which we'll talk about dealing with challenge will be when other people challenge us. It could be a kid, it could be a spouse, it could be a coworker, it could be a neighbor, it could be a president of the United States, whoever it is. And the third will be internal challenges, our own flaws, our own character traits that sometimes make us feel bad about ourselves and make us feel incompetent, make us feel like failures, make us feel like we're doomed to never be successful, etc. And how to overcome and to deal with the challenges that we give ourselves. Sometimes those are the hardest challenges, okay? But as far as tragedy, as far as why the Holocaust happened, why God would allow for what happened this year with Hamas coming in and killing so many Jews, we're going to still get to the end because you're going to see that the theme follows through, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. That's way beyond my pay grade. A few weeks ago, we were talking about, like, God didn't hire me as a spokesman. I would like him to. I've submitted my resume, and I would gladly take the job. If he gives me the job, I will take it. You know what I'm saying? I'll take it. I would glad to be a spokesman, understand the way God works, be able to explain it to everyone so beautifully and eloquently the way I'm sure God would enable me to if he wanted me to. But God has not given us yet that ability. And so it's not, although what we're going to say tonight can apply to tragedy and all that, but that's not what we're talking about. Let's talk about what we can overcome and figure out how to emotionally change the way we look at challenges in our life, that we can present them in a different way. Now, If you look on page 118 in your books, I put out pens. You actually have an opportunity there on that page. You have an opportunity. I'm sorry, Ellen. Oh, you hear me? Okay. You have an opportunity on the page to actually write down one particular example that's in your mind of a situational challenge that you're currently dealing with, or that you have dealt with that's still on your mind. And if you take 1 minute to write this down, I put pens over there if anyone needs a pen. Next to Ethel, there's a whole cup full of pens. Which we're going to give you. Take 1 minute. This will make the class much more valuable. Think of a situational challenge and write it. And then, if you could, think of a social challenge and write, yeah, Bonnie, take a pen. And I don't know if anyone else behind you needs a pen either. And the same thing with the internal struggle. Take one thing, just one thing, something that bothers you or challenges you or stresses you out about your own personality, and write it down. And let's see, by the time we're done tonight's conversation, if perhaps we have a new perspective and a new pair of glasses, how to address that particular challenge that we've struggled with and dealt with in the past. Deal? Deal. Now, I want to make one more disclaimer. Everything I'm going to say tonight, as all this whole course, is advice of the Rebbe. It's easy to think that the Rebbe had a very easy life. Like the Rebbe you're going to see is the ultimate optimist. If you know anything about Chabad and the Rebbe's leadership, you know that the Rebbe was the ultimate optimist who saw the good in every situation, as you're going to soon see. He saw the good in everything. And it'll be easy to think, yeah, well, he was the Rebbe. He had an easy life. He had whatever he wanted. He was important and he was successful. And I think it's just important for a minute to put into context the life of the Rebbe and how easy it would be for the Rebbe to easily be more pessimistic, or as pessimists would say, more realistic. The Rebbe was born, the Rebbe was born in 1902 in Ukraine, okay? Southern Ukraine was just like now, there was war, time, there were pogroms. He, as a young kid, he lived through quite a few pogroms that he survived. As a young teenager, he saw the World War I, the Rebbe talked about seeing all the immigrants coming, heading in his house, and his mother taking care of them. He lived through the Communist Revolution, the Ukrainian massacres of 1918. The Rebbe himself suffered from tremendous persecution. His father was arrested and tortured and killed by the communists. Many of his family, both his brother-in-law, sister-in-law, were murdered by the Nazis. Him and his wife escaped from France. They had to run away. He was in Germany when the war started. They escaped eventually from France. Was able to get to America, and he saw the Holocaust. Remember, the Rebbe became Rebbe in 1950. Judaism in 1950 was deeply, deeply under the Holocaust, and all American Jewry living in 1950 was under that shadow. There were many survivors. It was the whole community had that sense of gloom and of negativity and of harshness of we survived, but they were carrying a heavy yoke on their shoulders. The Rebbe dealt with every single life challenge. Every single problem that you can imagine possible was shared with the Rebbe, was put on the Rebbe's desk, on his shoulders. He kept burden. The Rebbe himself had a difficult life. He had no children. He had a life with no children. And the Rebbe carried tremendous weight, not just of communal responsibility. The Rebbe took deeply within his art so many stories of so many people, and I decided not to go that route tonight, showing stories of the Rebbe's empathy and how the Rebbe cried with people. The Rebbe did. When people came and shared their problems, the Rebbe would cry with them and felt that deeply. And yet, despite how deeply the Rebbe felt the pain of us, of his Hasidim, and again, I'm not showing this video tonight because it's not the theme I want to talk about. I want to talk about the advice for how to live with it, how to deal with it, not just say the Rebbe was a loving, sensitive person. Despite all that, the Rebbe had an unshakable conviction, goodness, unshakable. The Rebbe was not a pessimist or an optimist. Someone said he was an absolutist. He was an absolutist. To the Rebbe, the fact, we're going to discuss this in just a few minutes, the fact that the Rebbe was absolute in his clarity that directly shaped his worldview of the fact that everything that God does is good. And with that mindset, he was able to give advice in all kinds of situations that was very effective if you could just find in your heart to be able to know way. You'll see how effective it is. So I'm going to start this worldview with a very famous story in the Talmud. Okay, so far we're clear, no questions here, right? Good. Okay, there's a very famous story in the Talmud. We'll read it together. It is on page 120, text number 1. It's a story about a famous rabbi whose name was Nachum Ish Gamzu. And knows what that means? Ish means a man. Gam, what does Gam mean, Randy? A little speak. Also, Zu, what's Zu? Zeh? This. Zeh is this. So he was known as Gam Zu Latova. This too is for the good. How did he get that name? Let's read the story. Why do they call him Nachum Ish Gamzu, which literally means the Gamzu man? Some say he came from the city Gamzu. He called this too. Everything happened. Gamzu Latova. This too is for the good. So he got the nickname Gamzu. Because no matter what would happen to him, he would respond, Gamzu Latova, this too is for the good. Once, here's a story. Once the Jews wished to send the Caesar a gift to gain his favor. They asked themselves, who should we send to present this gift on our behalf? Why don't we send Nachum Ish Gamzu? After all, he regularly experiences miracles, and we need one right now. They provided Nachum with a chest filled with jewels and pearls as the gift, and sent him on his way. During his journey, he had to spend a night in a certain inn. During the night, the folks living at that inn surreptitiously removed all the valuables from his chest and refilled it with plain soil. The next morning, Nachum realized what had happened. Unfazed, he trustingly declared, Gamzu l'tova, this too is for the good. Nachum arrived, can you understand this happening? He left with gold and jewels. Now the people in the inn saw what was in the thing. They changed it. Some commentators say, didn't know what happened with simple readings. He didn't know. They put in sand, and so it's still heavy, and he's going. He says, he realizes what happens. He says, Gamzu l'tova. This too is good. He arrived at the Caesar's palace, and he dutifully presented his gift. The royal officers opened the chest and saw that it was filled with soil. The Caesar roared, the Jews are mocking me, and was about to execute the Jewish emissaries. Unfazed, Nachum Ish Gamzu trustingly declared, Gamzu l'tova. This too is for the good. Just then, Elijah the prophet appeared before the Caesar in the guise of his trusted minister. He suggested perhaps this is the special soil from the Jewish patriarch Abraham. When he threw his soil in the war against the 4 kings, it's in Genesis, it miraculously turned into swords in mid-air. When he threw stubble, it turned into arrows. The Romans were then at a war with a province that had proven itself indomitable. They took some of this earth, tested it by throwing it toward the enemy lines, and rapidly conquered that province as a result. When the Caesar realized that the gift of soil indeed contained miraculous powers, he ordered his servants to enter his treasury and to fill the chest with precious jewels and pearls. He presented the chest to Nachum Ish Gamzu as a token of appreciation and sent him off with great honor. Now that's a great story. By the way, there's a great postscript to the story. It's not part of the text here, but the postscript of the story is that when he was traveling back, the innkeeper where he was staying on the way back saw what happened and said, oh, I have miraculous sand in my backyard. Who knew? So he then filled up a big wagon full of sand and stuff, brought it to the palace. They took the sand, and of course, didn't work. And so he had him tied to a post. And everyone walked by had to take the wagon and throw it at this guy for his, anyway. So the point is, what's the story here? Nachum is on the way to go present a gift to try and influence the king. We don't call it bribes. That would be the politically incorrect word to use. Influence. I'm sure there's like more sophisticated ways of saying it, but he was sending a gift to the king. It's called a bribe in English. Now, you would think that if you have sand, it's not going to work. There's not going to be an effective bribe. But Nachum didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid. Instead, he was certain. He was confident, Gamzu l'tova, that this too would be for the good. Now, how does that make any sense? How is that possible to have this attitude, this believer's attitude that a Jew needs to have, that whatever happens, Gamzu l'tova, this is for the good? It sounds very, fantastic or fanciful. It doesn't sound like a realistic thing that we normal people, maybe Nachum Ish Gamzu had a lot of trust in God, but how does this make sense? And it's a fundamental idea. The story in the Talmud, we have to believe everything God does is good. How are we meant to understand it? Any thoughts? So tonight is not a philosophy class, so we're not going to get too deep into the philosophical aspects of this, but there are 2 deep, tremendously important philosophical or theological, rather, principles that we need to accept to appreciate this worldview. Number one is the idea of divine providence. In Hebrew, it's called hashgacha pratis, which means that God, being the ruler of every single detail and aspect of the world, is directly and personally involved in directing and in conducting each and every single thing that takes place in our universe. The Baal Shem Tov took this to the furthest level. Not just that God knows what's going on, not just that God is controlling what's going on with people, but anything in the world, a leaf, a tree, a car, a rain, airplane, whatever it is, whatever happens, anything that happens only happens because God made it happen. God didn't make it happen, then it wouldn't have happened. It's very simplistic, but it's really very simple. If you truly believe that nothing in the world can happen without God, then everything that happens in the world is because God made it so. And if God does something, he doesn't just do it randomly for no reason. Everything God does is part of his master plan. It has a purpose, it has a reason. And so everything that happens is a direct result of God's providence. That's principle number one. Principle number two is that God is the ultimate of divine goodness. In Hebrew, it's called teva hatov lehetiv, which means that the nature of good is to do good. And because God is the essence of good, so everything he does is good. If God wouldn't be the ultimate of good, then maybe there'd be times he does things that are not good. But God is not just a control of everything, and he also can do good. The essence of God is that he's the nature of good. And therefore, the nature of good is to always want to do goodness. Is that clear? Clear. We got to get these two principles again. There's so much, it's almost hurting me to not go more in depth, but tonight's not I was saying totally clear. Tonight's not a philosophy class. Tonight's about advice for life. So we have two principles. One, that God is in charge of the world. Number two is that God is the ultimate of goodness, and therefore everything he does is good. Now, it is true that sometimes we are punished for certain behaviors. This is clear, black and white in the Torah, and we find divine punishment written in the Torah and in Jewish tradition. Yet saying that God punishes us is not a contradiction to saying that everything God does is good. Why not? So the Rebbe actually addresses this in a letter. Let's see what the Rebbe writes, and then we'll explain it a little more. Page 122. To be sure, we recognize the Galus, the Jewish people's exile, as a punishment and rectification for failures to live up to our obligations in the past, as indeed we acknowledge in our prayers, where we say that for our sins we were banished from our land. But punishment, according to our Torah, is called Torah Chesed, the Torah of loving kindness, and therefore even the punishment must also essentially be kindness. Meaning what the Rebbe is saying is something very important, is that even when we are punished, the punishment itself is for our good. The punishment is to our benefit, meaning it's not that in order to make you a good person, I'm going to spank you so that you'll learn next time to be better. No, the actual punishment itself is a part of our learning process. My phone off. The punishment itself is a part of the punishment itself is a part of our learning process. That's part of our learning process. And therefore, even when we experience what seems to be like a punishment, is coming from God's goodness, and therefore even that punishment at its core is really good. Okay. If we're clear with that, I'm ready to move on if you are all clear with that. Okay. So we got the philosophy out of the way. Now let's get to the practical stuff. Let's get to understanding how is that meant to impact me when I am struggling with a difficult challenge in my life. How can I live in a way that this too is for the good in my own life? So, you may be familiar with the statement that when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Yeah. Lemonade is a delicious drink, a hot sunny Florida day. It's a beautiful drink. And, you can make some lemonade for Israel. I have some kids selling lemonade, and it's a beautiful thing to do. Is the story of, I'll ask you a question now. Put on your thinking hats for a second. Is the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu similar to the statement, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade? What do you think? No. Why not?
Because he didn't see it as a lemon. It was all good. So
okay, excellent. He didn't see it as a lemon. He saw it as good. Yeah.
It wasn't like he did something proactive to make the sand miraculous. It was God that did that, and God just made this miracle.
Well, so God did a miracle, of course. The question is the approach of Nachum Ish Gamzu. When he says everything that happens, this too is for the good. He's saying this too is for the good, similar to saying, everything is for the good, and so therefore, life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Yes, it's bad, but there'll be a good outcome. Something good will come from it. Or is he saying more? And he's saying that it's not that this is bad, which will come out something good from it. This itself is a good thing. See, there's a problem with saying that when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. I mean, it's not a problem; it's a good thing to say, but there's a shortcoming. There's a limit to that. Because it's true that if God gives you lemons, you can make lemonade instead of being bitter. But guess what? If God would give me grapes, some nice Chardonnay grapes, I can have a high-end liquor store selling, $100 bottles of wine instead of selling, $1 cups of lemonade in the schwitzing sun while I'm getting sweating outside in the heat, right? I'd much rather Chardonnay sitting in my air-conditioned wine store with right? So, making the best of a situation is good, but that's not what Nachum is saying. Nachum Ish Gamzu is not making the best of a bad situation. He said, well, it would be better to go to the king with gold and diamonds, but okay, I don't have that, so I'll settle for second best. I'll do plan B. Plan B, I'll take the dirt and the sand, and hopefully that also works out okay. No. And by the way, there's sometimes that you get lemons, and guess what? They're spoiled, rotten. The only thing you can do with them is throw them in the garbage. There's no lemonade coming out of that lemon. It's past the stage of lemonade. So what Nachum Ish Gamzu is saying, and the way that we're going to discuss tonight, the ultimate is not just to say everything that God does has a good reason. There are rabbis that said that, by the way. Famous story of Rabbi Akiva, who, if you know the story, he was traveling, he came to a certain inn, he wanted to stay there, they wouldn't let him in to the town, and he had a horse, a donkey with him, and he had a rooster with him, and he had a light with him, and then along came a tiger and ate his donkey he was riding on. Said, okay, everything God does is for the good. And then along came a fox and ate his rooster. It was going to wake him up in the morning. Everything God does is good. Then the wind blew out his candle. So everything God does is good. And then he's sitting there all alone in the dark, no donkey, no cat, no rooster, no candle. And along comes a group of thieves, and they ransack the inn where he wanted to stay. They wouldn't let him in. And they take all the people who are staying in, they take them all prisoners and captives as slaves to sell on the market. And because he had no horse or no donkey to make any noises, and no roosters started and start, cock-a-doodle-doodling in the middle of the night, and no candle to give away his hiding place, he was hidden in the darkness in the bushes on the side of the road, and the thieves never saw him, and he escaped. So that's a story where something bad led to something good. What Nachum Ish Gamzu is saying is that the dirt itself was the best thing he could have had. If he would have come to the king with gold, would the king have been impressed with gold? Maybe not. The king already has a lot of gold. I mean, gold is nice, but it's not like the king wouldn't be wowed. He wouldn't be blown away by another chest of the king. He has lots of chests of gold. But when you come to the king with magic sand that can kill your enemies, now we're talking business, right? Now we're talking a gift. You get whatever you want. The sand is actually what allowed him to experience the best, not the best of a bad situation, but to see the greatness of that situation. So with that introduction, we're going to go to our first video. We'll do it in two parts. I want you to look at the story and think about how do you think the Rebbe will address the situation.
To bring the
Neshei Chabad convention in Detroit, Michigan. Let's say 20 ladies went to figure out how many children did we leave at home. Baruch Hashem, on my note.
It was in February 1979, and Monday morning, the women, took off for the airport because they were all planning to travel home.
In Brooklyn, in the shadow of Grand Army Plaza, some parts of Eastern Parkway are plowed out. But as you can see here, other parts of the parkway are not at all plowed. These cars stuck and good.
The Rebbe hat geholfen. There was a terrible snowstorm. So all the ladies are sitting at the airport in Detroit. no planes.
To give you an idea how bad it is and how long it may take for New York City to dig itself out of all of this snow, that tow truck is attached to this city's snowplow.
Miriam Popak is the head of Neshei Chabad out-of-town conventions at the time. Now her daughter, Mrs. Feldman, took over. She went to the telephone and she called New York.
They have to get home, and here's the snowstorm, and they all began panicking. And they asked my mother to roll up 770 and ask the Rebbe for a bracha. They should be able to travel home.
Okay. Look at the end of the second. What do you think? That's not it. No, that's not it. That's not it. There's another part of the video. I put it together. What do you think the Rebbe is going to respond to them? I already gave you the underlying philosophical premise of the Rebbe's worldview. What do you think the Rebbe is going to tell them? See it as a vacation. Okay, don't worry. Don't worry, you'll make it home eventually. There's a reason why you're there. You got to find out why you're there. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's see what the Rebbe says.
These are the words of the Rebbe. Monday, Chaf Beis Shvat. The Baal Shem Tov's teaching that every occurrence contains a directive in serving Hashem is a topic that has been spoken of and discussed at length innumerable times. I am sure that you too have given speeches on this topic. Yet now, when an incident has happened to you, you seek to attach the most distorted possible interpretation. That is absolutely amazing. The simple and obvious reason for the delay is this. It is possible to disseminate Torah and mitzvos to a far greater degree than was accomplished during the convention. You are therefore being granted the merit through the snow which descends from heaven of completing the above task with an extraordinary abundance and intensity of Judaism, similar to the extraordinary abundance of the snowfall. Your efforts in completing the convention's task of disseminating Torah and mitzvos should be extended to the city, the airport, publicity in the newspapers, etc.
Women ran around the airport giving out Shabbos candles.
Some women went off to the university campus. Some of them set up different booths in shopping malls, also with Shabbos candles and talking to the women about all the mitzvahs of the Jewish women. After they reported to the Rebbe of everything they had done, this is what the Rebbe answered. It is a particularly great merit when the Almighty points with a finger and clearly shows one what to do from on high. May all your activities undertaken as a result of this divine indication be highly successful. It is obvious that each and every woman will soon travel and reach home, for she will have completed her mission.
Okay. You hear what the Rebbe is answering over here? The Rebbe is not saying that we need to look at every event and like try and retroactively try and find a purpose or anything. When you are in the situation, you need to ask yourself, what is God's purpose for me right here, right now? Because if a benevolent, loving, kind God engineered this situation to be in this way, then obviously this is the event that will lead to the best possible results. It's a very clear, direct, simple perspective. And in fact, the Rebbe was like shocked. You all, the woman in the convention, you all believe in the idea of divine providence. You all accept the idea that God is good and God loves us and God's here for us. And these ideas that are basic to the Hasidic worldview, how could you fail to realize the opportunity here? It's a beautiful perspective. The fact that the snow's not bad, but you can find the time. Anyway, let's go find a way of transforming lemons into lemonade. Let's find a way that you can go do something better. The Rebbe is saying is that reframe the whole situation. Recognize that God sees the power that you created by being gathered for this convention, and now is giving you the opportunity to utilize that inspiration and that power you got at the conference and to actually use it to influence more people. And those interactions that happened that day in the university and in the malls and the airport only were able because God had made a snowstorm. And the whole snowstorm that came to cancel all those flights was to allow the women to utilize the and the power that they had created for themselves at that convention. It's such a beautiful and radically different worldview. It's not just that it's bad that we'll have a good outcome. The snowstorm is good. The purpose is for you to be able to do something even greater than you could have done if you would have flown back home to your kids. Make sense? Is this clear? Excuse me, you're shaking your head a little bit. It makes sense theoretically. Well, that's exactly what the Rebbe said to him. He was like, shocking to me that you're coming from a whole convention. So the Rebbe was like, I don't get it, ladies. You were just at a convention talking about divine providence, and yet you're missing the obvious divine providence of being stuck in Detroit for another day. Well, the Rebbe guided them. But the Rebbe wants us to learn on our own. That's correct. Okay, so let's do another story, which will have the same idea. So with the Rebbe himself, this is in the fall of 1977. Okay, in the fall of 1977, there was Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeret rather, which is the beginning of the holiday Simchas Torah. And the Chabad would do the dancing with the Torah and Hakafot 2 nights. Not just Simchas Torah, but also Shmini Atzeret. So when the Rebbe would dance on Simchas Torah night, there was no limit to the joy. The Rebbe would stand for hours and personally lead and encourage the dancing. I was never there. I was too young, but I've heard from the stories. It was in a tremendous energy, and the Rebbe would stand for hours with non-stop dancing, non-stop for hours. 1977, in the middle of the dancing, the Rebbe asked for a chair to sit down, which was like, had never ever happened. People saw the Rebbe's face got white. There's a lot of details of the story. They broke all the windows. Everyone ran out of 770. Eventually, it turned out that the Rebbe had a massive heart attack that night. He had a second one, even stronger one later. And the Rebbe didn't want to go to the hospital, and they quickly called in doctors. The office was cleared out and turned into a makeshift, like a field hospital, where the Rebbe stayed in his room with doctors and around the clock care till he eventually went home. Rosh Chodesh Kislev. It was like a little bit over a month later, 37 days later, I think it was. So the next day, Simchas Torah was a very difficult day. Shmuel says, like, it's the day to be happy. The Hasidim are worried, and then the Rebbe had a heart attack. People didn't know a lot of the details. How serious is it? The Rebbe didn't come down. And then that night by Simchas Torah, the Rebbe sent down the message. And on the day of Simchas Torah, the Rebbe sent down the message with Rebbe Yoel Khan. Yoel Khan is we're going to avoid getting into a discussion who he is now because we're running out of time. One of the greatest rabbis in the Hasidic community. And the Rebbe asked, we're going to give him a message to give to the Hasidim. What was the message? So he said the night before, the doctor was taking blood from the Rebbe. The doctor was taking blood. He, putting the needle to the Rebbe's arm. And the Rebbe asked him, tell me, what is it that makes the blood go out of the vein into the syringe? Is it the prick of the needle? Or is it the vacuum of the syringe? The vacuum, we have a doctor in the room, we have a medic, a doctor, and the answer is correct. The doctor, the prick of the needle is what allows the blood to get out of the vein. But what's actually drawing it is the vacuum in the syringe that draws the blood from the body. So the Rebbe says to the doctor that someone had complained to him that he feels void and empty, and he's an empty space with not meaning inside him. And the Rebbe told him that on the contrary, emptiness sucks him much more. Person who feels empty, when you're empty, you're a vehicle, you're a vessel that can suck in much more than the person who thinks that they're already full and they already made it and they already know everything that they need to know. And then the Rebbe asked that this message should be shared with the Hasidim downstairs. So it passed on to Rabbi Yoel Khan, and he shared this with the Hasidim. Meaning, what was the Rebbe's message to the Hasidim? There's a vacuum right now. Normally, Simchas Torah, I'm downstairs with all of you together and dancing and the farbrengen and the joy and the celebration of the holiday. And now my space is empty. The seat is empty. I'm not there with you. So there's a vacuum. But that absence, not that something good will come from the absence. It's the absence itself that allows for a suction of greater joy, of greater energy than what could be formed if I was there dancing together with you. Understand? That's the Rebbe's answer. And this is why the rabbis and the Talmud use a metaphor to describe the Jewish people of oil. Jews are metaphorically composed that may produce oil. Why olives? So text 4a, a quote from the Talmud in Menachos. Rabbi Yochanan taught. Why are the Jewish people? Text 3 was the text that she read in the video. That was the letter that they were reading. So page 125. Rabbi Yochanan taught, why are the Jewish people compared to an olive? To inform us that just as an olive provides its oil only through being pressed and crushed, so does the Jewish nation return to the good path only through the suffering that they experience. And the previous Rebbe explained this Talmud. Let's read text 4b. The process of extracting olive oil is described in the Torah as crushed to be a luminary, specifically in the era of exile. When everyone is broken and crushed, are we able to reach our inner luminary? Meaning every Jew contains within our hearts, within our souls, a deep, deep, powerful inner strength. But sometimes we need to be a little crushed to allow oil inside us to come out. The crushing, the going through adversity, the going through the challenge is not meant to break us. It's meant to allow a deeper reservoir of strength within us to be exfoliated, to be expressed. And it wouldn't come out if not for the challenge that was pushing us. Michelle agrees.
Break it up and then you smell it. And it comes out.
Right, so the flavor of the mint can only be expressed when you break it. Or anything, maror, if you ever had maror, right? You ever ground maror before, that's a negative, but if you want to really experience the maror, you got to grind it, and then you'll see exactly if it's strong or not, how strong it is, and how many tears will make you cry as you're making it. Cutting an onion. But the Talmud uses a more example of the oil, but the same. The only way to get to oil is the olive. Not for the sake of crushing the olive. Oil is more valuable than the olives. The oil is the value. And that's how you get there. Okay. So this, my friends, this is the hidden power that we have inside us. And this is the core of the Rebbe view on dealing with adversity. This idea that Gam Zu L'Tov, everything God does, well, we take it back. Everything that happens is, number one, from God, right? There is nothing that ever happens that's not from God. So if it's happening because God allowed it to happen. Number two, is coming from a good God that only does good. And because God only does good, that means that what's happening to us is not something that could potentially have a good outcome. What's happening to us is even more good than what we would have normally expected. It will produce a good even greater than we could achieve normally. And sometimes we're lucky to see it, sometimes we're not. But the point is to learn from Nachum Ish Gamzu. Here you see the Rebbe spells it out very clearly in text number 5, where the Rebbe spells this out. That, as I already said, when Nachum Ish Gamzu took the soil to the king, what was the cause of the miracle? The fact that he had soil. If he wouldn't have had the gold and silver that he had taken with him, it may not have had any influence. It's only the soil that he was given greater good than what he could have ever made on his own. Text number 5 says the Rebbe, 126, at no point did Nachum Ish Gamzu suffer any harm. It's not like he was going to benefit from it. On the contrary, had he delivered the original gift of gems to the Caesar, there was no guarantee that the Caesar would have received the gift graciously. For the Caesar had no shortage of his own precious gems. By contrast, his gift of soil wound up being received very graciously indeed. The only difference is sometimes we see the hidden blessing. Sometimes in the story of Nachum Ish Gamzu, why is it a beautiful story? Why is it a beautiful story? Because he saw the end. The king saw the miracle and the king gave him whatever he wanted. It was a very happy ending. And sometimes we're not blessed to see the end of the story. That's true. Sometimes we don't get to see it. But the facts don't change. Whether or not we get to see only part of the picture or we get to see the whole picture, doesn't change the core fundamental belief that we as Jews need to have in remembering that everything that we experience in our lives is coming from a good God. And therefore, it is for our best. And this itself, this too is good. This too is good. Okay. With that, is this idea clear? Should we try and make it really practical now? That's how you know if we really internalize the idea or not. If we can translate it into our language. To say it in the abstract, theoretical way is easy. Question is, can we actually translate what we just said, the Gamzu Latova, can we translate that into a situational challenge we're currently given? So someone to share their situational challenge? No, you don't want to share. Someone? Could we talk about a broken pipe? Could we talk about anyone want to share? Nobody. You had a flooded house. You had a broken pipe. Okay. So how could that be good? Still working on it. So it's impossible. Exactly. And that's exactly what I was thinking, actually. That maybe there's some repairs, some renovations you wanted to do to your house that you never get around to doing, either because you didn't want to spend the money, or because you know how things are like, whatever, one day I'll do it. And now you're going to be forced to create a more beautiful home than you would have had if not for the flood. And insurance will pay for it. So not only will you get a more beautiful home, you're going to have insurance to pay for it, at least part of it. So now you're going to get a beautiful home, and it's not even out of your pocket. You know, they say the joke about this, these two guys meet on the beach. So the first one says, what happened to you? I thought you were working in New York, and they meet on the beach in Florida. So I had a fire in my store, terrible fire, burnt down the entire store. I collected insurance. I retired. I'm here in Florida enjoying retirement. So that's so interesting. What's with you? So now I had a flood. I had a hurricane. So I had a hurricane in my store, and the whole store was destroyed, and I collected insurance. So the first one says to the second one, how did you make a hurricane? Slightly later. So maybe the flood is actually a blessing. Of course, you would never go flood your home. You never go flood your home. Stress and all the mess and cleaning stuff up and having those big, you have those fans in your house. You feel like you're living in an airport. Yeah. So I've had that. You feel like there's like an airport moved into your house for a few days and like the noise. Yeah. But then you'll have the opportunity to do renovation that you would never have done otherwise. So it's not that the flood is bad, but because of that, something good will happen. If not for the flood, there would never be renovation. The renovation is like the demolition. Is demolition bad or good? If you walk into our synagogue a year ago, and we were knocking down walls and pulling up carpet and taking down the ceiling, what did it look like? It looked like a war zone. It looked like a war zone. It looked terrible. But that's not terrible at all. It's not like we were doing something bad to allow for something good. The demolition is what's creating the opportunity for higher ceilings, for a more beautiful design, for nicer lighting, for more beautiful carpet. Everything we have only is possible because we first did demolition. Demolition is a part of the renovation. It's a part of the growth. Part of the growth.
Maybe a guest come. You don't know yet.
Well,
Perfect room.
right. No, so anyone else want to share a situational challenge? Let's make one up. Give me one. Just throw one at me. Yeah, a situational challenge. So I know a person that got a flat that ran out of gas. Another person, a rabbi, he ran out of gas on the side of the road. He was driving. Not in here in Florida. He was driving. Rabbi Daniel Moskowitz, he was driving somewhere to meet someone in Illinois. He got like in the middle, like Yehupitz. He was low on gas, and there was no gas station in the middle of nowhere. He was driving, ran out of gas. Finally, he found it was a gas station, whatever, like a few miles away. He was walking, and he gets to the gas station. I think maybe he found the bottle in his car. He was looking at the garbage in the gas. I think he was like looking by the gas station. He was looking in the garbage. I found like some kind of container to put gas into. And some guy stopped him. It's like, "What can I help you?" Some big, massive guy, the kind of guy you would never talk to. But when you're desperate for help, you'll talk. And it was offers. And he explained the situation with his car. And the guy, "I'll help you." The guy had a gas canister, and he helped him. They filled it up. He got into go back to his car. And and he didn't think he was Jewish, he was like a massive guy with tattoos, and he looked like a real trucker. The guy says, I'm doing a big mitzvah, Amantine. Something like that. Something like, what? And he met a Jew, and they put on tefillin and whatever, and that was an opportunity that only happened because he had to walk to the gas station and look through the garbage and try and find. And you're imagine the rabbis busy looking through the garbage, trying to find the gas, some kind of empty bottle he can fill up gas into. You understand? Opportunities.
Their neighbor's dog got out, ran away. They left the dog with the neighbor. They ran it. My son was home and they got the dog. We rescued it for back to the house, of course. And they go, "Oh, we did a mitzvah." I said, "You sure did."
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so here's part one. This is part one of our class. In every single challenging situation, it is our job. If we believe in God, we believe in divine providence, if we believe God is good, we must look at that situation and say, where is the opportunity here? Where is the blessing that God is for sure giving me in the situation that I could not get in any other way? That is a question we need to ask ourselves in every situation. Now, again, we won't always see it, but when you're in a difficult situation, the more difficult the situation, obviously the greater blessing, the greater the opportunity that is there, hence the greater challenge at the moment. Let's take it up a step. This was the easy one, so to say. Okay. Now let's talk about challenges that don't come from acts of God, but come from acts of man. Acts of God and acts of man are two very different kinds of situations. Acts of God, I can understand the snowstorm is part of God's plan. I mean, the snow came from heaven. So the fact that we got snowed out and we can't fly home because there's a snowstorm, I can accept it. That came from God. But what about when my spouse, my neighbor, or my kid are making me crazy and they won't stop arguing with me and they won't stop nudging me and they're pestering me and they're getting under my skin, and I can't blame that on God, can I? Or can you? You can. Very good. You guys are brilliant. The fact that that person's able to speak at this moment is because God gave him the breath and the life and the ability to speak. Yes, he's making his own free choices, and we're going to leave that conversation of free choice for another night because it's not a philosophy class tonight. But the fact is, despite his free choice, God is allowing that choice to happen. God enabled that choice to happen, and God is giving the opportunity, and God is giving the actual vitality and life of the choice this next to you is making as they're chewing your ear off or as they're fighting with you or whatever they're doing. So even in such a situation, even when the adversity in our life is not an act of God, but it's an act of man, an annoying man for that matter, nevertheless, the answer is the same principle, the same idea. Let's see a video, two stories, different stories, both of people, one a politician in Israel, and one a Rahman, and one a Rabbi Lau, who faced opposition from other people. How the Rebbe is telling them not just stick it through, don't be intimidated, but no, not don't be intimidated. The fact that you're being challenged proves what you can accomplish. The challenge is a blessing greater than if you would not have a challenge. Let's.
ואחרון חביב, אם מותר לי לבקש בשביל עצמי פעם משהו. יש הרבה אנשים שרודפים אותי. בגלל זה שאני מצליח לעשות את כל הדברים האלה. ועושים לי כל מיני בעיות. בנושא של חקירות ומשטרות, איך אני מביא כסף מאמריקה, ואיך אני עושה את כל הדברים. הייתי מבקש שהרב ייתן לי ברכה, שכל הדברים האלו שעושים נגדי, לא יעלה בידי אף אחד, ושאני אצא מכל הדברים האלה חזק ומחוזק. להיות בעל הבית על המחשוב של איש אחר, זהו אי אפשר, כי הקודש ברוך עצמי ניסים בחיל וחפשי, בכל לכת ואחת בבני ישראל. אבל מה שאתה יכול לבקש, שזה יפיל מזה כל להזיק, ואדרבה, זה יהיה עת יותר, את הפסיקה יותר, כטבע של יהודים, שהם רואים שמישהו יסמגר, עדיין מתעורר אצלם ברצון לעשות דווקא ככלל. Wir haben Mittwoch behulte die Stimme das erste Mal am Mikve Schütte von Chabad in Tel Aviv, das ist bei Bora und Gabi Bora, mit Kika Dizenkoff auf Rechon Bar-Kochma. Wenn ein Stück alle Arunten geschehen ist, wir sind nicht gewähnt, als Sache, kommt in den letzten 15 Jahren. In welchen Stand der Dinge, dass man geht zur Stadt, akkordem als in die Gewinn Kenirus, lassen wir machen Tintier. Wenn die das gewähnt haben, wollen wir an dort verlieren. Schaut sich gewähnt an hier, und wir machen noch ein Issue, wir sind nach dem meisten Welt im Klub. Sie gewähnt ein starker Jeder. Aber die sich am Batten bewattelt gewähnt. Ja. Weil er hat die Brüche für mich. Dann nehmen sie bei der Dinge noch stärker. Wir waren zu stehen, das Loch heran.
Okay, so here what are we seeing? What was Rebbe telling these two different people? Oh, you're having people fighting you and opposing you. That's meant to encourage you to see the greatness that you can accomplish. Same thing with the mikveh. The fact that there was a opposition to your, the fact that there was opposition to your mikveh, that and now you became it, proves it created a more established validity than before. So the fact that that person was fighting you, that came from God. And not only was it a bad thing that whatever overcame it, that challenge in and of itself provided you the opportunity to achieve things that you would not be able to achieve until this moment. Until this moment. Until this moment. And you can take this even further. Not only when people challenge us is it meant to make us stronger, but even when people are challenging people, they themselves, nothing to do with us. I look at this person, I think this person's a person. They're a Russia. They're wicked. They're selfish. They're narcissistic. They're idiots. They're whatever it is, right? You ever think that about other people? And never, never. And yet, deep within them is also goodness. And if we can train ourselves to find how to focus on the good that they have, revealing that good will actually reveal the good that they have and help them discover the greatness. Watch this very interesting story with Alan Dershowitz. Also, turn it on 1 second.
I remember I had the chutzpah once to write him a letter saying, Rebbe, how come for your 80th birthday you decided among those you wanted to honor was Senator Jesse Helms? At the time, Senator Jesse Helms could, I think, be fairly described as a Sonei Israel. He was not a friend of the Jewish people. He was not a friend of Israel. So, in my naivete, I wrote the Rebbe a letter. He wrote me back one of the most beautiful responses. He said, you honor not only to influence the past, but to influence the future. He said, watch Senator Jesse Helms over the next years and see whether or not our decision was the correct one. Within a year of that honor, Jesse Helms had become one of the strongest supporters of Israel in the United States Senate. And as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, one of its most important. You live and you learn, and I learned a great deal.
Okay. So what do we see from that, my friends? Go back over here a second.
I remember I had the chutzpah once to write him a letter saying, Rebbe.
Okay, fine. So here we come to the second thing here. I want to say another story first before we get to internalize this. Another story. It's a beautiful story from Rabbi Shmuel Lew in England. And I'll tell you a personal story. Rabbi Shmuel Lew in England, so he says a beautiful story. He once came to the Rebbe and in a private meeting, and the Rebbe asked him about an influential person in England. He was from London, but a certain Jewish activist in the community, if he had been in touch with him. So Rabbi Lew told the Rebbe, actually, he's been campaigning very strongly currently against something the Rebbe had been pushing. The Rebbe had been pushing a certain campaign, and this particular activist had taken a public stance against the Rebbe. And so when the Rebbe told this to the Rebbe, immediately in his mind, he started to think to himself, when I get back to England, I'm going to go make a meeting with that guy. How dare he speak against the Rebbe? I'm going to go talk to him, and I'm going to go explain to him. The Rebbe read his minds, and the Rebbe, without him saying it, the Rebbe said, and I don't think that it'd be a good idea for you to go and speak to him about this particular issue that he's fighting with us about. So being a chacham, this is how he says the story. Being a wise guy, I looked at the story this afternoon. I was preparing. I went to go watch the story again. So like being a wise guy, so I thought, okay, the Rebbe said, I can't go. All of the other Chabad rabbis in town. He's already thinking who else he could ask that's more friendly with him, has a better relationship, that they could go speak to this activist about his public stance against the Rebbe. And then the Rebbe, again reading his mind, says, nor would it be a good idea to have somebody else go speak to him. So he's thinking the Rebbe said to him, there are 613 mitzvot in the Torah. If he doesn't want to join us on this particular mitzvah, there's still 612 that he can still join us. Don't look for the one thing he's publicly can't come against and make that into, now we're officially enemies. There's still 612 things that he agrees with us on. So work with him on the other 612, ignore the one that is a disagreement. What's the core message? Core message here is, yes, it's challenging you, and yes, there's obstacles, but why are there obstacles here? Because God is creating an opportunity for us to connect to this person on a deeper way than we would normally. And once you're able to get past that initial block and you can connect deeper level, well, guess what? Now you've really connected to them, and now you really can bring out the good in them, and you can bring out more that wouldn't have been the challenge first place. The challenge is not it's a challenge, but it's not a negative. It's forcing us to dig deeper to really find the connection. I can give you a personal example. For all of us, when do you really connect? The greatest friendships, the greatest relationships are usually formed after there's some kind of a fight, there's some kind of a separation, some kind of like a disconnect. When is the love? I don't say the love. When does sometimes you feel most in love with someone? After you had a fight and you made up. In relationships, that happens. When everything just, we're friends, okay, we're friends. But when there was something that challenged us, and then we worked to rebuild that, what we have now is much greater than what could have been if not for that challenge. And that is the message that the Rebbe gave to people in dealing with societal issues, when they were dealing with opposition and when people that were challenging them and fighting them. So if they're fighting you, you know what that means? You're being given the opportunity to reveal more within yourself than if you wouldn't have been challenged. Or you can reveal in them more than they would have. So I'll tell you the story. When 2011, we were 2 years. Some of you know the story. None of you sitting in the room are here. Well, maybe Ethel maybe. Were you here in 2011? No. So we got shut down by the fire department. For 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, we got shut down by the fire department. This whole building was one building. There was no walls, there was no firewall, there was no nothing. And it's a long story. And the fire inspector came the first year, fire inspector came like an instant, whatever. Second year, we had a fire inspection. We have a fire inspection every year. Fire inspector came, and it was one room. There were curtains, and there was like with the child pot on like electric cords, and the problem was there was no sprinkler system. There was no a lot of things. It wasn't set for assembly. It was used as a blockbuster. So she leaves. She says she's going to come back. She's going to send me a report of all the violations. Next day, I come to shul. She's waiting for me outside with a cease and desist order. Cease and desist order. There's life safety violations. It wasn't the violations because I ran to the fire department. I don't get distracted in the story. Point is, according to the fire chief, we had illegally changed the use of the building from mercantile to assembly without going through the fire department. Now I got in the business tax license. We weren't like operating under the radar. But for however reason, and we already had a fire inspection the year before that we had passed, just for the record. But we still had illegally change the use of the building from mercantile to assembly. So with life safety violations, no sprinkler system, there wasn't panic bars, there wasn't alarm, whatever. Life safety, cease and desist order. This is exactly 30 days Rosh Hashanah. After 45 days of the after Yom Kippur. So I was panicked. I called my father. I'll never ever forget this. I called my father, was a very seasoned rabbi. He was a little, he could be very blunt. And I called him. I said, "What should I do?" I was like panicking. Now you finally became a Chabad rabbi. That was his first thing. Till now, so to say, my life was easy. I came, I knew people, we were doing well, we had a minyan going, we were growing. We were working hard. It wasn't we weren't working, but there hadn't been an awful yet in our shlichut. There hadn't been a moment where we faced a complete wall, and I didn't see how in the world this is going to work. Rosh Hashanah is in 1 month exactly, with a Wednesday when we got shut down. And Rosh Hashanah was on Wednesday 4 weeks later. Like, how in the world have Rosh Hashanah in 4 weeks? Thank God I was too stupid to know that it takes a long time to get planned, permits, and construction. Now that I know we had a miracle, open miracle. But just so you know, Wednesday we were shut down, Wednesday afternoon. Thursday I thought, okay, we're going to build a wall, whatever, the firewall you see right over here. And then in less than 4 weeks, we had an architect draw up plans. We had the city give us, go through all the revisions, get rejected by the fire department, something they were wrong about, resubmit it, get permits, and have construction done in 4 weeks. 4 weeks. Wednesday, Rosh Hashanah was 6:30 p.m. At 5 o'clock in that for Rosh Hashanah, I got the CEO to be in the building. You understand? But those words of my father, I'll always remember them. Now you finally made it as a Chabad rabbi. You're being challenged. Now you have to really, you're going to bring forth a reservoir of strength from within yourself that you had to pull through. And I look back, I have no idea. We raised $30,000 to build a wall. This is 2 years after we moved. I look back after, like, I didn't know how we did it. I don't know where the money came from. I don't know. I can't explain it. I can't explain it. I mean, it's an open miracle. But the point is that challenge, the fact that the fire department came and said, you can't be here, cease and desist order, something from outside is checking you, that helped us build a stronger sense of community and pull together and reveal within ourselves that do things that we otherwise we never would have thought we could do. Until today, I still think I could do things. Everyone says it's because I've already done it. That was part of that. So that being shut down by the fire department, at the moment, at the time, it felt like a tragedy. It felt like the whole carpet was just pulled out of my feet, right? I'm getting ready for our second high holidays. Now being, but that was the greatest opportunity to a whole new level of growth of community than was before. So this, my friends, is the second stage that we're dealing with. When we have obstacles coming from other people, challenging people, we have to recognize both within ourselves, how this is bringing out within ourselves, and also to connect to them and to find their potential to reveal what we would not be able to reveal if they weren't giving us a hard time. It's like a tough student. A tough student, sometimes the person is giving you a hard time, you end up connecting them deeper if they're just listening and they agree with you, okay, they agree. So I made my point, you agree, it's good. When you don't agree, I have to try and explain to you and argue with you and convince you, and then we bond on a deeper level. Now I made it. Yes. Yes.
So now you rise into level.
Correct. Okay. And so, my friends, we're going to go on to the internal challenges, to the challenges we face from our own weaknesses, our own character that we can't blame on anybody else. It's much easier to blame everybody else, right? Some people are really talented. They can even blame their own internal problems on other people too. Some people know how to do that very well. I got a problem, but somehow it's your fault, right? There are people who know how to do that. But we're talking over here about people that are emotionally honest with themselves. What? Am I describing someone that you're talking about? Yeah. There are people that are very good at that. They're natural. They don't even realize they're doing it. It's like automatically, my problem is your fault, and it's okay. So it's the same logic. The same way we have to recognize, I should just say this first. It's the hardest to fight is against ourselves, which is why it's easy to blame our problems on other people. it is much more difficult to change yourself. I mean, in a way, it's easiest to change yourself, but in a way, it's very difficult to overcome your own flaws and to very easily become discouraged and dissuaded and say, I can't. This is who I am. It's the way God made me. God made me with this handicap. I mean, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I'm handicapped spiritually. I just can't feel it. I can't deal with this emotional. I have an anger problem. End of discussion. That's who I am. And we feel stuck that way. And the Rebbe encourages us to realize that just like the situational challenges of our life are created by a God who's in charge of every single detail of creation, and that God is a good God. And just like the nudniks next to us, or our spouses or our kids, were also created by God, guess what? We ourselves, with all of our mishigas and all of our baggage and all of our issues that we carry, we were also created by God, exactly the way God made us, because that was the best way that we could be the way we could be. Now, I have a challenge. It seems like God could have made me a little bit better. It seems like God didn't do such a good job. And if I was in charge, I would tell him to change a few things about me that I would like a little different, right? So I want to show you a beautiful story in the Talmud. And we're going to analyze the story and come to a whole new appreciation for why God makes us struggle with ourselves. Beautiful story. Join me for a piece of Gemara, text number 6, page 129. There was a rabbi. His name was Abaye. And Abaye overheard a man suggest to a woman, let's get up early in the morning together. When she agreed, Abaye told himself, I better follow them to from doing something forbidden together. They're going on the road, the two of them alone. It's better stop them. He shadowed them for a distance of 3 parsan, which is approximately 12 miles. He trudged through a reed field, so they walked along the road beside it. However, they did not use the isolation and early hour as an opportunity to sin together. As they parted ways, Abaye heard them commenting, the road was quite a run. The company was certainly fun. It's actually rhymes in Aramaic as well. Abaye then told himself, if I were that man, I wouldn't have managed to restrain myself from sinning with her. Abaye was honest with himself. And he realized this man was alone at night, traveling. They thought no one was watching. I don't know if I could have withstood that temptation, that opportunity for sin. He stood in thought, slouched against the doorpost and feeling distressed. A certain elder approached him and said, a greater person has a greater inclination to sin. Forgetting his friend. His Yetzer Hara. You heard of the Yetzer Hara, right? You know that little guy? He's the evil inclination that pulls us away from doing what the Torah tells us to do. Torah says to behave one way, and yet there's a voice inside us that's telling us to behave a different way. And we struggle with that Yetzer Hara. Every one of us, whatever that Yetzer Hara is, we know we should be behaving one way. We know we should be giving more charity. We know we should be more humble. We know we should be more generous and more kind and more focused and more, not look at certain things. And yet, our Yetzer Hara pulls at us. Our Yetzer Hara pulls. So Abaye, he's a rabbi. He's a holy man. He considered himself to be a person of moral, upstanding values to go and protect these other people from sinning. And instead, what happens? He realizes that they got the whole night traveling together and nothing happened. They were in the hotel together and they didn't do anything. He doesn't know that he would have been able to hold that temptation. And all of a sudden, he felt deeply, deeply distressed. Maybe I'm not as holy as I thought I was. Maybe these simple people are holier than me. Maybe I've misjudged who I am as a person. And that you can imagine that he felt really deeply pained. He felt like, I wonder whether I even belong here in the yeshiva. He's standing by the door of the yeshiva. And he's like, the Talmud mentions, standing, touching the doorpost. He's wondering, should I even enter the yeshiva? Do I even belong here? Like, is this even where I am? Or am I fooling myself? Am I pretending to be holy than I really am? So along comes an older man, and he gives him wise words. He says to him, the greater someone is, the greater his Yetzer Hara is. Now, what does that mean? This is obviously an important statement that has been addressed by many commentaries over the years. The classic analysis of these words, that the greater person is, the greater his Yetzer Hara is the idea as follows. That unholiness is attracted to holiness, right? There's a certain balance, the way God made the world. And so when there's a person who's on the very high level, guess what? the Yetzer Hara is given more power to undermine him. The Yetzer Hara wants to win against this guy, and that's one way. That there's, because you're greater, so your Yetzer Hara is equal. Some places explain that if you wouldn't have a bigger Yetzer Hara, you wouldn't have free will. Free will and free choice is only if you have equal balance. So if you're a guy that has only a little bit of propensity to holiness, so your propensity to sin is also lower. But if God wants to give you a reward for making the right choices, he needs to give you an equal challenge, right? You can't expect a genius to play chess with a 2-year-old. It has to be equal. So God gives the greater person a greater Yetzer Hara to balance, to make it a fair challenge, and to give him the reward for overcoming and doing the right thing. Makes sense? That's the classic interpretation, that the greater you are, either the more unholiness is attracted towards you to try and fight you, or that on a similar vein, because you're holier, therefore gives you a greater Yetzer Hara to make it fair, to make it worthwhile when you make the right choice. Make sense? The Rebbe, and those are the classic explanations. It's a fair game. Fair, if it's not fair, it's not fair. You have to get rewarded only if it's a true challenge. But the Rebbe offers such a beautiful, beautiful interpretation of this Talmud. And the Rebbe says, and not because the person is great, therefore he has a greater Yetzer Hara, but rather the opposite around. Because he has a greater Yetzer Hara, that's the reason why he becomes a greater person. Let me explain that. Abaye felt that his own personal shortcomings proved that he wasn't great. And in fact, says the Rebbe, you know why he was? Because he has shortcomings, because he had a Yetzer Hara stronger than that person who traveled along with a woman all night. He had such a strong inclination, and yet he was able to overcome that inclination. That's what gave him the ability to become the great person that he was. Let me give you an example, okay? I'll use the Rebbe's example first, and I'll give you my example. I have my own example, but I'll give you the Rebbe's example first. Here's the Rebbe's analysis. Because you have a greater Yetzer Hara, that's what makes you a greater person. So he gives an example of the rocket. Go back, absolutely. Sure. So here's the Rebbe's example, and I'll give you my personal example after. So on the Shabbos after the Apollo 8 went up to the moon in December of 1968. Who remembers 1968? You don't have to raise your hand, it's okay. I'm just joking. So Apollo 8 mission went up to the moon, and it was the first manned spacecraft to orbit the moon. And that next Shabbos, Rebbe spoke about the rocket ship. And do you know that 90% of the weight of the rocket at takeoff was fuel? That's right. 90% of the weight at takeoff of the rocket of the Apollo 8 was the fuel it was carrying. Now, from the rocket's perspective, the fuel is a tremendous burden to be carrying. You're trying to be as light as possible. You got to defy gravity. Weight doesn't help you defy gravity very easily. So if you're the rocket, you would say, yeah, let's lighten the load. Let's just get rid of all this fuel, and it'll be much easier to take off. But of course, the load the rocket is carrying, all that fuel, is not extra weight. The fuel is the only thing that allows the rocket to have enough push to be able to break forth and to get up. And there's a whole thing in the footnote to explain, but I'm not getting into the whole science now. We all understand. In order for a rocket to shoot that much fire up and to get that much power upwards, you need a lot of fuel. So the fuel is not only because you want to go high, we're going to give you a lot of fuel. It's because you have a lot of fuel. 90% of your weight is fuel. That's why the rocket is able to go so far that it can even break through the limitations of gravity and to get out of our atmosphere and to get into space. Understand? So it's not that Abaye says, why do I have such a great Yetzer Hara? Must be a low life. Because you have a challenge. Oh, that's what allows you to become great. I'm going to give you a different example. Kid is in school. Two of my kids. So you have a bunch of kids in the class, and the teacher gives one kid a test with more work on it. So normally we say that because he's a smart kid, he gets extra work. Or because he got extra work, that's why he became smarter. Understand? People think, I don't want to give an iron heart to my kids. I have Baruch, I'm blessed to have wonderful kids who are very well-behaved kids. And my kids have a lot of responsibilities. They have at home and shul, they have responsibilities. So is it because I have good kids that's why I give them responsibility? Or is it because I give my kids responsibility that's why they're good kids? Obviously, it's Hashem's blessings, Hashem's mazel, and all that. But a part of it is because I give my kids responsibility and because I make them earn what they have and I make them be responsible and to speak at the Shabbos table and to take care of the younger siblings and to do chores in the home. So because they have responsibility, that is what makes them into the kids they are. Think about it tonight as I'm preparing. One of my kids is struggling right now in school, one of his classes. He's doing good in school. He's a good kid. He's a smart kid. But one particular teacher can't stand him. And he's like, his brain shut down already in that class. He's done. If you have kids, you've been there, right? So, and it's just that there's a struggle. He doesn't like that teacher. He hates that teacher and he can't handle it. And he's like, can't handle a single piece of work for that teacher in months. And at that rate, he's going to fail that class. And Chana have come down really hard in the last 2 weeks. And it's like a whole fight. He doesn't want to do it. He gets a test tomorrow. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't know it. So is it, I was thinking about this. Is it because I'm forced, because he doesn't know material and really should know? It's not too hard for him. He's not smart enough to do well in the class. So is it because he's smart enough for forcing him to do the test? Or is it because we're forcing him to figure out how to figure out the information, to do the work that he missed and all that, that's going to give him the grit and the work ethic and the ability to succeed in life that he wouldn't have if he wouldn't have a difficult teacher? You understand? Now, he doesn't understand what I just said now. I didn't say it to him. I couldn't say it to him. He wouldn't understand what I'm saying to him. It would go over everything I had, be like a rocket ship over his head. He thinks we're torturing him. He thinks we're being not fair to him or making him work too hard. He does. I'm being honest. He thinks that we're making him have a tough life because we're having there's a big like incentive on the table. If he fails even one grade, we can't. So like we're putting pressure. And he doesn't like the pressure. But that pressure is not that because he has a bad teacher, we're trying to overcome the bad teacher. This difficult one's class that he's having is going to give him more value probably than any other class that he's doing well, and he's learning fractions or whatever. Okay, so he's learning and he's doing well and he's a smart kid and good. But the class that he's struggling with will be the class that will probably, now that I'm thinking about it, in all the life skills that he's going to gain out of this year in school will be the skills he's going to be forced to gain in the teacher that he hates. Understand?
At least one teacher.
Oh, of course.
And we learned that we had it for it, and similar occasions arise when you get a job and your boss.
That's exactly what we try telling my kids. Exactly. That in life, you got to do things you don't like. And in life, you got to interact with people you don't like. And that's just part of living life. And you got to learn. And that's why you got to do well, because it's not just about the information. Fact information, because they argue you don't need information. Whether you do or you don't is irrelevant. You need to learn to have the work ethic and the grit to be able to do things you don't want to do. And that's exactly what he's gaining. So the point is, Mitzvah Hashem, God will help us and bless us. We'll have nachas from our kids. He will be a better student, not despite the fact that he had a bad teacher. And not because he's a smart kid, even though he had a bad teacher, he'll overcome and he'll do well despite it. Because he had a bad teacher, that will be the opportunity for him to achieve more than he could ever achieve if him and this teacher weren't having this clash or he didn't like this teacher, etc. Make sense? Makes sense. Okay. Says the Rebbe, text number 7, page 131. In order the good inclination should be able to soar even higher, there is a need for tremendous quantity of material. The inclination for evil that stands in opposition. The more this quantity is increased, meaning the more powerful one's inclination for evil, so will the ascent caused by overcoming it be all the higher. Okay? Here we go back to the same idea over and over again, that God is giving us challenges that allow us to become the great that we can become only because we're willing to, because of the challenge we wouldn't think we could become otherwise. 1 second. We're going to run that low on time. Let's go to the next videos. Why is this not, okay.
I came to Crown Heights to try out Yiddishkeit, to go into yeshiva. I wanted to see if I wanted to be religious. I ended up staying there for 4 years or a little more. In those years, I requested from the Rebbe a tikkun. I wasn't happy with some of the things, the way I behaved in the past. Okay. The Rebbe said, use it as a lever against itself. For example, if you are such an egoist, if you see someone else learning better than you, say to yourself, I can certainly learn better than that. And then go and do it. And when the Yetzer Hara sees what it's being used for, oh, stop bothering me. Okay, that's the end of the Yechidus.
Is doch mit der Erzählung heiti, ist doch verstandig, a jeder Linie, was tut sich in der ewigsten Welt, was dort der Rein und Einziger Balabos, ist doch eine sichere Sache, als in der Ruf muss sein, behalten Teil, und sie mehr nicht wie toll an den Menschen, als soll sich in der Ruf missbeinen sein. Ist auch viele, wenn der Tevis behalten, ist eine sichere Sache, als wird am Eis gefunden.
He was saying to me, you have to realize that God is good, and everything that you experience in this world during your life, even your own inner negative character traits or whatever, it's all from God, and it all is nothing more than an opportunity.
Bemele sei das mehr nicht alle bei, soll suchen, gedorrusch, wird sicher gefunden, bis in ein Leben von Neil, als damit werden dichtig, aber der Tev ist da echt in der Minyan.
When I was studying in Montreal, I was having a great difficulty with my study partner, with my chavrusa. We would be at loggerheads with each other. We would study the Talmud, the Gemara, whatever he would say, I would say differently. Whatever I would say, he would say differently. And I went into the Rebbe. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I'm just arguing with the guy all the time. And I told the Rebbe that I need some guidance as to how to handle this. The Rebbe said, it would appear that one of your latent gifts is pilpul, the ability of analyzing and arguing and coming to a certain conclusion, not simply straightforward. The Rebbe said that I should spend time in working at pilpul.
Is a sichere Sache, bechol Linien wie Linien ist dort Tev und Peloschen ha-Judu, was sagt die Yerushalmi, als ihm reich ist, dass Humikem, bemerkt nicht dem Tev, oder ein Gefintem nicht, dass Humikem, reich ist Humikem, ist die Sibelose, was hat nicht gesucht, wo man darf suchen oder wie man darf suchen.
You know, you could have taken a situation which, well, to me it was quite destructive and quite negative, and then it saw tremendous power and a tremendous opportunity, a tremendous potential in terms of developing a certain mode of study.
The ideas we're discussing here are very, very important, really beautiful ideas. So let's review this third thing. How to deal with internal challenges. Rebbe teaches us to harness our flaws for greater positive achievements than we ever will be able to achieve. And this is, I'm not going to do the last part of the class. I'm going to read text 8 and show you one last video that I really wanted to show you, which was not part of the class, but I'll tell you why after. One last letter from the Rebbe. Look at text number 8, where the Rebbe again is addressing a person that was dealing with a tremendous personal challenge. When I say challenge, they were dealing with a temptation for sin that was very, very strong, and they felt condemned to this temptation for the rest of their lives. And they couldn't understand, why will God make me struggle with this temptation? And the Rebbe answers, a beautiful answer. Text number 8. No human being can answer such questions, which only Hashem the Creator can answer. One observation that can be suggested in relation to the question, why me, is if an individual experiences a particularly difficult or trying situation, it may be assumed that God has given him extraordinary powers to overcome the extraordinary difficulty. The individual concerned is probably unaware of his real inner strength. The trial may therefore be designed for the sole purpose of bringing out in the individual his hidden strength, which, after overcoming his problem, can be added henceforth to the arsenal of his revealed capacities in order to utilize both for infinitely greater achievements for the benefit of himself and others. The fact that you have this obstacle, you have this challenge, you know what that means? That you have a great ability within yourself. And the fact that you are given this challenge is because God is giving you the way to reveal that ability that you have. If you wouldn't have the ability, you wouldn't have the challenge. But the challenge is not there to challenge you. The challenge is there to allow you to reveal an inner strength you wouldn't be able to find on your own. An inner strength you wouldn't be able to find on your own. There's a very beautiful story, a famous story, a classic story of a young man who was hanging out in Antwerp, in Belgium, Rebbe Levititsky, from a religious family. And anyway, at some point, he got involved with a non-Jewish girl, fell deeply, deeply in love with her. He decided he was going to marry this non-Jewish girl. And you can imagine that his parents were horrified. They were heartbroken. When the son's going to marry out of the faith, marry a non-Jewish girl, they were very, very broken by this. They tried taking him to this rabbi, that rabbi, but no one could talk to him. He was in love. There was no one to talk to, and he was done. So they came to Rebbe Levititsky what to do. So Rebbe Levititsky said he should really go to see the Rebbe. He should go to the Rebbe, go to the dollars and go see the Rebbe. So he didn't want to go. In the end, they finally made it a deal. That he would go see the Rebbe, and this would be the last rabbi he was going to talk to. And whatever happens, that's it. We'll go see the Rebbe on condition that his parents don't nudge him anymore after this. It is what it is, and they don't ask him to go see any more rabbis, and they agreed. He went to America, got online for $1 to go get $1 from the Rebbe. Comes to the Rebbe, and he had his whole spiel ready. He was ready for this. He was, comes to the Rebbe, says, Rebbe, I'm getting married to this non-Jewish girl. He had a date or whatever, getting married. And the Rebbe looks at him, and the Rebbe says to him, I'm jealous of you. I'm jealous of you. Now that was not the answer he was expecting from the Rebbe. I'm jealous. He was like, they totally threw him like he was not ready for that. He was ready for you're destroying Judaism and go step on the Torah and all the hail and brimstone that the other rabbis that gave him. He was, I'm jealous of you. So that totally got him by surprise. And the Rebbe told him exactly what we've been discussing for the last hour and a half. When God gives a person a challenge, it's only because that person has the ability within themselves to overcome that challenge. And the greater the test that a person has is a proof of the greater capabilities, the greater strength, the greater potential they have to overcome. I, said the Rebbe, will never be given such a test like you're being given. The Rebbe is never going to have this challenge or this obstacle, this test of wanting to marry out of the faith. The fact that you have such a test that even I don't have is a proof of what a tremendous strength of character you have in yourself to be able to overcome. The challenge is there to help bring forth what you might not have known you have. The fire department helps you bring forth the power you have that you would not discover if not for the challenge. The challenge is there to help you discover who you really are. And with one last video, which is a powerful video.
Simcha story.
What he do? He broke up. I think he broke up. Then the story, he walked in, that was it. He broke up. The Rebbe got to him in a very, very deep way. I forgot the end of the story. The ending. The last video I want to show you, first of all, I'll tell you I'm related to everyone in this video. The person, Hershke Gansberg, he's talking about over here, is my father's uncle. It's my great uncle. His son, one of his grandkids is my second cousin that I went to India together with. Yossi Gansberg is one of the grandkids of Herschel Gansberg, you'll see in the picture, whatever. And here you see a story. It's a sad story. It's a sad story. He suffered a loss. And we're not talking about tragedy and loss and all that tonight. Yet, he found in himself, we're talking, it's the exact same idea, everything we're talking about. He suffered a difficult moment. And instead of allowing that moment to pull him down, he allowed that moment to allow him to find an inner strength, an inner depth, an inner power he would not have known he had if not for the challenges and this tragedy that he faced. Watch this video. It's a powerful video.
Simchas Torah is the happiest day in the Jewish calendar. Jews everywhere celebrate in unbridled joy, dancing with the Torah deep into the night.
But the year 1969, Simchas Torah, will forever remain etched in my memory. In Chabad, the custom is that the Rebbe instituted that Chabad Hasidim don't just celebrate in their own communities, but they go out on what is called a halucha. They walk to surrounding communities, sometimes an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, to dance and celebrate with different shuls and synagogues. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Gansberg, a famed chassid in Crown Heights, did exactly that. In 1969, Simchas Torah, he took his young children, 5 of them, and walked to a synagogue in East Flatbush to celebrate with them. And indeed, they began to dance, and then something jumped out at everybody. Rabbi Gansberg was dancing with such fervor and passion, it was impossible to ignore. Something was happening here. There was a 14-year-old boy in the shul, and he turns to his father and says, "Who's this man? And why is he dancing so?" So his father whispers to him, "This man lost his wife 6 days ago to a terrible illness." And you see these 5 children, a 16-year-old, all the way to the youngest 7-year-old, they are tragically orphans. They've lost their mother. How can he dance like that? And the father said, "That's a Jew. That's a chassid. He digs deeper and finds superhuman strength that on Simchas Torah we don't succumb even to great tragedies. We allow the deeper inner joy of the neshama of the soul to celebrate." The dancing finally ended. Rabbi Gansberg took his children back home to Crown Heights, dropped them off at his house, and then made his way to 770, the central synagogue headquarters of Chabad Lubavitch, where the Lubavitcher Rebbe was leading a farbrengen, as he always did that night of Simchas Torah. Now, he had the privilege to begin the songs at these farbrengens. Between the talks, he would lead the song. And when the Rebbe finished speaking, suddenly, Rabbi Gansberg burst out a famous Russian song, "Not water can drown us, and no fire can destroy us." The Rebbe gave a look at Rabbi Gansberg, knowing fully well what had happened, and connected with him, stared at him, and jumped up from his chair and began dancing. Eyewitnesses say, like they never saw the Rebbe dance again. And the whole synagogue was dancing with Rabbi Gansberg in his agony and his pain, but in tremendous celebration of Simchas Torah. Fast forward, 20 years later, a phone call comes into Tzivus Hashem. This is the organization that organizes events for Jewish children. Man is on the phone and he says, "Simchas Torah is coming and I'd like to sponsor a program for children." It's an interesting request, so the person on the phone asks him, "Why are you doing this? What's motivating you?" He says, 20 years ago, I was a 14-year-old boy in an East Flatbush synagogue, and there was a man, Rabbi Gansberg, that came in with 5 children, and I never will forget how he danced. And I remember what my father told me. He had lost his wife. And there I saw his children, and I said to myself that the day will come when I can afford to sponsor an event for children, and that day has come. I know the story, not only growing up in the community, but on a personal note, because several years later, in 1983, I married that 7-year-old girl, the 7-year-old youngest child, Shandi, who went to that synagogue in 1969 with her father. That night in 1969, Simchas Torah, one of the most powerful lessons that you'll ever hear, that Rabbi Gansberg personified and demonstrated was, we don't control the circumstances, but you can control how you navigate these circumstances. The worst thing can happen, but you have the choice to dig deeper and find a reservoir of eternal strength, and that is stronger and more powerful than the greatest darkness. And when you access that, that light dispels the darkness, and the joy is more powerful than the greatest tragedy.
Powerful story. So the woman that passed away, Rashi,
Simchas
Rashi Gansberg is my Zaydi's sister. My grandfather. Those are my cousins. My father's first. There's a Beryl Gansberg who lives in Montreal that I used to hang out in his house a lot. One of the kids, the boy, and his son and I went to India together. We were in South Africa together, Montreal together. We were in Chavrusa. We studied Gemara together. So, but the point is that's a personal story. But the point is, Herschel Gansberg is a perfect example of what we're talking about. This is a more dramatic story, and it's with a more difficult challenge. But the point is the exact same. That a challenge could either be something you look at it like it's challenging, or you can say Gamzula Tova. When you say this itself is an opportunity for me to find a deeper strength, a deeper joy, a deeper, as he says, superhuman strength to be able to overcome and to find a joy that I would never experience if it was just a regular Simchas Torah without the challenge that I'm dealing with at this time. So when we have challenges in our lives and struggles in our lives, this is the message we need to take with us. Whether it's from the outside, whether it's from the people, whether it's acts of God, we know ourselves how to stay strong. And my friends, I hope you all enjoyed. Looking forward. Next week is the last lesson of the series, Spiritual Heights, discovering how to grow ourselves in a practical way. Be some very unique ideas, maybe a little bit counterintuitive. So join us next week. Same time, same place. Thank you very, very much. Hope you all enjoyed.